save this. Okay, we're good to go. So hello everyone, and welcome to the 5th webinar of the CBE Spring Series. We're very glad that you could all join us today. In this webinar, you are going to hear from Dr. Kurt Linberg on designing micro-credential CBE certificates with pathways for college credit. So the presentation will last roughly 45 minutes, and there should be about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. However, if you do have questions along the way, please log them into the question box, and we will get to them at the end of the presentations. I will be reviewing the questions or your comments throughout the webinar, and then I will read them out to Dr. Linberg so he can answer. So without further ado, I will pass the ball to Dr. Linberg, who will take it from here. Dr. Linberg.
Thanks, Carlos. Well, thanks everybody for spending some time with me today to go over the process that I've been using for designing micro-credentials that are competency-based, and they lead to pathways for college credit. So a little bit about me. Odd background, started off with math, moved into computer science and engineering, and then a doctorate in applying management and decision sciences. Broad experience across technology as a software engineer, manager, project manager, and then a long time in education, faculty member, dean, provost, vice president, and now consultant. A common thread with all of these experiences, I really enjoy working with smart people on innovative projects that help others and contribute to the institution's success. I'm great with strategy and ideas, but I also feel that ideas are one thing, but results are also important. And I've worked at a couple organizations that I feel really were fun to work at and very innovative, and that's Capella and Medtronic. So from a consulting aspect, after a short time at WGU, I expanded the family-owned marketing business to really specialize in higher education market research, rapid CBE development, assessment, micro-credentialing, and quality improvement of teaching and learning across all modalities. Hodges University was my primary consulting arrangement during that time. I helped the president and leadership there with strategy formation, quality improvement across their online, hybrid, and traditional delivery modes, and then also used this process to develop their first micro-credential. I've worked some with Texas A&M, with Wheelock College and Learning Mate, and currently I'm helping the Community College of Colorado online with streamlining course development, improving instruction, and then refining some of the key strategies around affordability, like open educational resource use. And we support at least 35,000 students. So here are the steps that I go through, and I'll go through these quickly, and then I'll spend some time on each one of these. So a dozen steps, a lot of these are repetitive, and you even have to back up at times. But it all starts with identifying a local employer need. Once you do that, you want to validate if there's a global need, and you do that with some market research. Step 3 is harvesting the competencies. 4, establishing the assessment strategy. 5, once you've worked through these competencies and the assessment strategy, you meet with the employer group to vet and refine these competencies and strategies. Then the course design process happens, where you're allocating major competency areas to courses, and then within those courses, modules. 7, creating or curating the content that you need for these modules. 8, create the assessments for the modules, and you also have to create the associated evaluation rubrics. Conduct employer demonstration and refine. 10, pilot the course or courses and refine. 11 is where you create a pathway strategy for college credit. And 12, execute a go-to-market strategy and launch. So these are the 12 steps. But why start with a micro-credential? Right now, there are workforce needs that are not being met. We're finding that learners desire a shorter path to a credential and less expensive. When you look across the university systems in this country, the research is showing us that CBE is rather new. So there needs to be more time for faculty to acquire the expertise to design and support competency-based education. For those that have been working on CBE programs in your organization, you know that operationalizing these programs is not easy. To support non-term starts, financial aid, how to get your learning management system to work with CBE, and then also the challenges navigating the regulatory approvals. So a micro-credential allows you to avoid some of these challenges. So let's move into the first step, identify employer need. Working with key employers to identify their highest priority workforce need. It's important when you have that group of employers together to really listen. You might be like me, where I've been on many advisory boards, I've facilitated advisory boards, and often we spend more time trying to convince these employers that we're teaching the right thing, that the MBA is the greatest MBA in the country. But in this case, we have to listen. And you might not like to hear what they have to say. For instance, they might say, we don't need a 4-year graduate for our call center. We need candidates that can be effective customer service representatives, and we need your organization, your university, to make sure they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities before we hire them. It's also important to hook in any workforce development groups in that area to reinforce, are they seeing this gap, and see if they've already heard about the gap and maybe there's initiatives that they have started. And it might be a perfect time to see if you can assist them to fill that gap. I mentioned Hodges University. There was a really good relationship with the top Hodges academic people and the employers in the area. And it was so easy to quickly get that group together to pull information about their competency needs. But also there was workforce development groups, and there was some money there to reach out and get some grant funding to work on this micro-credential. So that was the first step. But before you spend a lot of time within your organization trying to pull this together, you really need to validate, is there more need than just this local employer area? And I suggest you do the 4 Ps and you apply these to a competency-based program. So you look at the product, what does the employer want? What does the learner want? What features must be put in this micro-credential? How will it be unique? From a price perspective, price matters. What is the price that learners would afford? How much instructional costs you have to design in to make that a reasonable price? Place. Up front, you need to figure out if it's going to be 100% online or if it's going to be a mix or some face-to-face. The Hodges micro-credential, basically we had the workforce development folks saying that they wanted evening programs. And then we also heard that online was also important. So we actually designed the micro-credential for both modes of delivery. Responsive design, will your learners want to access the course using their mobile device? If so, it has to be responsive. What is the suggested time to complete the course and certificate? Although it's a competency-based program, you really need to set the expectation that it will take this amount of time to complete. Promotion, you don't want to build it and assume that learners will come. You need to find out what kind of promotional strategies you'll use. Also, reach out early with employers and see if they will advertise to their employees or the workforce agencies. And how will you plan to increase your brand awareness? So these are all things that need to be addressed early on. So one source of information that I just feel is just so instrumental in designing these micro-credentials, or designing any competency-based program for that matter, is ONET. You can go in and do searches and figure out what are the skills, knowledge, and abilities for certain jobs, what education is typically required, what is the Department of Labor predicting for job growth. And what we wanted to do at Hodges was really look at a high demand job that did not require a college degree. And one that stood out for us was a customer service representative. So as you can see in this chart, United States is predicting a 5% increase between the years of 2016 and 2026. But in the state of Florida, and that's where Hodges University resides, there's a 22% increase during that time. So a lot of job openings. They don't need a four-year degree, but they need to have some type of some type of competencies to get in the door. So then it comes time to harvest these competencies. So what do these learners need to know and do to be successful in this job? You can ask employers to share their job descriptions. That's a good source of pulling together the competencies. Again, ONET is a great source. So for instance, the customer service rep would have these knowledge, skills, and abilities. But as you can see, they're not really crisp competency statements. What you need to do is pull this together where a competency statement might be, for example, the learner can effectively handle unpleasant or angry customers. We know that a very good customer service representative will have angry customers to deal with, and a competency would be how effective are they to address these customers, and do it in a way that won't hurt the business or upset the customer even more. Let's see, the fourth step, establishing an assessment strategy. Now this doesn't mean that you're going to work out all the detailed assessments for these courses, but have an overall understanding of how will you show that learners have mastered these competencies. So I would suggest that you, for these micro-credentials, you really look at more authentic assessments, get away from tests and focus on real projects, and get the employers to weigh in and say, yes, that would show me that this learner does have that competency. Rubrics are very, very valuable also, because then the student or the learner can see if they're just developing that competency or truly have mastered it. A challenging part of some of these competencies involves some of the soft skills. So hard skills are fairly easy to assess. Soft skills, those are often a little bit harder, but we created the certificate at Hodges to actually give the learners an opportunity to practice these skills in a safe environment and work with peer-to-peers to better their competency development. Okay, I'm in step 5. So you've built out at least a preliminary list of competency areas and competency statements. You've got some assessment strategies. Now it's time to assemble that employer group and ask, are these the right competencies? Are we missing any? Do we need to refine some to get them to the right level? Assessment strategies. Will these show mastery of competency? Is there a more relevant way to show mastery? And again, spend a lot of time listening. An example from Hodges, we felt pretty comfortable with the list of competencies that we had, and I think we were right around 55 at that time. And a couple employers were really urging us to consider, and I'm trying to think what it was. It was self-reflection as a competency. They said we're bringing on employees and we can't really give them feedback because they feel like they're perfect. They have no awareness that they're not perfect. So that was challenging to hear that. It's like, all right, I understand the competency. How in the world are we going to assess that? So we had to spend some time figuring that out. So I guess the point is, don't be surprised if the employers kind of come up with some new ideas and challenge you. Okay, step 6, this is where you start looking at those competencies and you start breaking them down into, okay, these would fit into course 1. And then when you've got course 1, what kind of modules will you need to build those competencies? And then lessons within a module. So a lesson is a very bite-sized piece in the course where you've got 1 to 3 objectives. You've got some learning resources that are very relevant. And then as the students go through these, when they have knowledge checks then to show, yes, they've met the objectives of that course or that lesson. If not, then they can go back up and figure out what piece they didn't master at that point. So that's that whole process of taking competencies down to the lowest level, and that's a lesson. At Hodges, it was a requirement early on to make sure that the learners doing the online versions could use their mobile phones to do their work. So that was quite challenging to get everything down to that bite-sized piece. So you can imagine a very busy young adult or old adult, like even for that matter, that's stuck in traffic in a bus, and they can actually complete a lesson or two and move towards completing that course. Some things to keep in mind for building the most effective learning is incorporating these design attributes. So when you break down the courses into modules and lessons, it needs to be intuitive. And as you could see, pretty standardized. Every lesson would have the same pieces. Every module would have the same structure. Every course, the same structure. I mentioned cohesive module content. The module has to really hang together well. Often in higher education, we struggle with trying to fit a lot of stuff into a 15-week course or a 10-week course or a 6-week course, and we try to get the seat time equivalent hours in there, and we're putting stuff that might not really make sense, but we need to make sure that students are spending the required time in the course. I mentioned bite-sized learning. These are often very, very busy people, and they're probably not going to sit down and want to read 200 pages in a book. especially for a micro-credential that was designed for this target market. They need very, very relevant content and the ability to take that and practice with peer-to-peer evaluations along the way. Let's see, I mentioned authentic assessments already, and you need to make sure that the competencies align with these assessments throughout. There's also a number of deeper learning principles that can be applied in your designs, and this is where you can revisit competencies just to make sure that students have a lot of opportunities to practice and master those. We heard that a really strong communication was important for the target audience with the Hodges certificate. So we incorporated various ways of assessing those communications across the courses. Seven. So if I look back at the work on this Hodges certificate, there were three major things that helped us be successful. First, I mentioned that Dr. Timmer, one of the top academics there, had such a great connection with the employer group. We were able to really get face time with those folks. The second one was OER. We were able to find OER that we could modify and really wrap around the modules pretty rapidly. It took time to find the open educational resources. For every, I would say 20 that we looked at, one source was really good. Not something that you could use as is, but still something that really helped us build these modules quickly. You really need to strive for the relevant content. Less is better if it addresses the competency. I mentioned the responsive design and accessibility. So all those considerations need to be added to the creating the content process. Assessments, make sure that they meet the expectation of the employers. Make sure that they're clearly aligned with the competencies and how you're evaluating them. Here's just a high-level look at a rubric where the competency involves handling an unpleasant or angry customer, and then a learner taking that module, practicing. They would get feedback on you're still developing or you're proficient, or some might even hear and see that they're very distinguished. They have this down. Let's see, number 9. All right, as you're putting these courses together, I really urge you to not do them all and then go to the employer group, but incrementally. You got a course done, you want to get some feedback, assemble that group, look at the competency areas, demonstrate the modules in the course, make sure you take all their suggestions and go back and refine the course as needed. You might find, even at that point, there might be somebody in the group that says, what about this competency? And then you look around and the employers are all like nodding their heads like, yep, that's important. And then it's like, well, let's see if we can't get that in. Step 10, This is where you pilot the courses. So you get a representative small cohort. You have them take the course, and then afterwards you pull out some key information, like did the learners find that the course content helped them practice and build mastery? Did they feel that the assessments were clearly defined and relevant and allowed them to show the mastery? It's important, if it's an instructor facilitated course, to identify any concerns that the instructor might have with the course content or assessments. If you're doing an online or a hybrid course, did the learners find that the platform was easy to navigate? And if it truly was responsive design for the courses, how well did their mobile phones work? Step 11. Now this can happen earlier. I've decided to put it later in the process. I hope in the future, there's an easier way to link training competencies with educational competencies. Right now, there isn't, as far as I could see. The best strategy that I've used, and I've used this at Hodges, is to do a roadmap or a crosswalk. And here's an example. So let's say you've got an advanced certificate, and some of the courses in that certificate cover Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint to a pretty deep level. So the learner really knows those three Microsoft products. Then you'll take a look at a 3-semester-hour course that's being offered that's related to Introduction to Microsoft Office. It has a number of different learning outcomes. My suggestion is you work with those faculty members in that institution that are teaching that course, and you show them, here's what these learners know and can do. Show them the assessments, show them the course design, and get an agreement from them that yes, any learner coming in with that level of competency does not have to take my class. I will support doing prior learning. So that's one way right now to create a pathway for credit. I think in the future, with more and more competency-based programs, that alignment will be a lot easier. But right now it requires collaboration with the faculty member that's teaching a 4-credit course. And you can see other similarities. If there's communication competencies at a pretty deep level, that might relate to a composition or a writing course, technical writing maybe. So that's the suggestion that I have for creating a pathway strategy. Number 12, executing the go-to-market strategy. Initially, I suggest doing it with the local employers that you worked with. You can then collect testimonials from these employers and the learners, which will then feed more marketing opportunities for building more of a global audience. And then with this success behind you, you can design the next level of certificates. So in summary, I believe starting with a micro credential, if you're new to CBE, or even if you're not, it makes sense. You can quickly meet a local employer need. You can gain employer support by meeting their workforce need. You can build or start to build the necessary capacity within your organization for doing more CBE development. The certificate could also create a new revenue stream, which could basically pay for additional CBE development work. And you would avoid the long regulatory approval cycle, and I call it the one-off financial aid process, the more of the manual processes that have to be invoked to support CBE programs in most universities right now. So that's the suggestion that I'm making with a micro-credential. I just wanted to share this. I presented this at CBE Exchange a couple of years ago. And even though it was meant for university level CBE programs, I realize it's just as appropriate for a micro-credential. And that's making sure that if you're doing CBE, make sure it's a mission fit. You've got the right institutional support, funding. You've got both the technology support and the operational support. You set the realistic expectations, 7 and 8, as you could see in this presentation. You got to get the competencies right, and you got to get the assessments right. And you have to have quality learning resources. You have to have the resources that learners need to quickly gain the competencies. And you need ongoing employer engagement. So that's all I have, Carlos. If people want to have any more details, they can certainly track me down. Here's my contact information.
Well, thank you, Dr. Linberg, for that wonderful presentation. So at this time, I want to open it up to questions. So if you can start jotting your questions down in the questions box for Dr. Linberg, we'll head into that round. And I already have a couple of you, actually, Dr. Linberg. So Dr. Blair Smith is asking, have you seen any integration of industry-recognized certifications, such as IT or healthcare, into these type of micro-credentials? Great question.
Let's see. That is a good question. So I've got to believe that it's happening someplace across the country, especially in the areas of IT. Nothing right now stands out as a good example.
Okay.
But
and we can certainly follow up with Dr. Smith on that one as well.
Yeah.
So we'll keep that question in mind and see we can provide further contact for those specific fields as well.
Yeah. If I can just add a little bit more,
Sure.
In the whole IT industry, in a way, they've been ahead of this by having all these different certifications. There was Cisco certifications, Java certifications. So in that case, that might be the micro-credential that already exists. The areas where there's gaps right now are, like customer service or some of the more soft skilled areas.
Excellent. Emily Smith is asking, how do you determine pricing for these offerings?
That's one that we struggled. You have to look to see who else is doing something similar and how much are they charging. And then a key constraint is it a self-paced course, or is it a instructor facilitated course? So you've got to actually do some financial modeling to figure out what is the price to charge for these courses, or if there's 5 courses, maybe there's some bundling pricing. But for the certificate at Hodges University, we really wanted to have the students go through all 5 courses because we couldn't really assure the employers that they had all those competencies without going through all 5.
Okay. Lisa Burma asks, well, I actually got in this question for a couple of people. Will this PowerPoint be emailed to us or available for attendees, Kurt?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll talk after and see how we can send it out. From Sadiki, does anyone have a template job description for faculty lead in developing a CBE program? We would like this person to provide leadership to peers, mainly in the Gen Ed area, to develop course programs, competencies, assessment and training, etc. Thank you. So I guess more of a consulting, question here, Kurt. But do you have a template or example on how to develop CBE programs?
Can you repeat that question again?
Yes, it was a long one. The question is, does anyone have a template job description for faculty lead in developing a CBE program?
I don't, but I would probably have that person go and look at some of the universities that are farther along with competency-based.
Sure.
You know,
and I think I can point Sadiki in the right direction with that as well. So I'll email him after. Lisa, how to determine the time allowed in each course, and in parentheses duration of that course?
That was also hard because the general requirements that we had, we wanted a learner to complete a course in a week if they had 40 hours. So it was really focused on, is it possible for them to develop competencies that are in this one course within 40 hours? Now that's a general rule because it's a competency-based. Somebody might already have some of these skills and they can go through really quickly. Others will take more time. Maybe it'll be 2 weeks. But we really needed to set the expectation with the employer that we could offer this certificate and be pretty confident that the learner could complete within 5 weeks.
Excellent. Okay, from Fadil R. Tarsi, which universities would you say are best examples of applied CBE with a model that truly is aligned to workplace needs?
That's another really good question. I think that the jury is still out. You know, I've mentioned that I worked at WGU, and I know the Capella Flex program, and they're designed more towards providing an option for a degree program. So taking English 101 in a competency-based version versus a traditional kind of version. So they're not really getting at the specific workforce needs. One thing that comes to mind is Capella partnered with Career Builder to develop some certificates in like web development and some of these other workforce needs. And I haven't heard how well that's going, but I think that was a pretty good start in showing leadership. And if anybody else,
and I have some examples as well that I can share with you as well, Fadil. So I'll try to touch this with you after the presentation. From Wilson Garland, have you looked at badges or other methods of standardizing recognition of these micro-credentials?
Hi, Wilson. Long time. Let's see. Yes, in fact, Hodges, they wanted to have some badges associated with this. And there's actually it's not as easy as just saying, yep, claim this as a badge. And there's more sophistication. And I think that they do want to pursue associating badges to this, but it's something that they didn't want to hold up their launch or their pilot for this. So I think that ultimately they'll have a badge. They might break it up into maybe like the major competency areas and assign a badge to those, or the whole thing might be a badge. But in the future, I would say that badges will be important.
Excellent. Thank you, Kurt. And then I just have some comments from people saying that this has been very helpful in understanding micro-credentials. So we really appreciate the presentation. For the attendees, this will be recorded. So I will send you the link to that in case you want to share with other people. Next up, and it's actually going to be the final webinar for the spring series, we have the company, Kurt, you mentioned, he said the Competency-Based Education Network. We are going to have on May 23rd a webinar titled All Tooled Up and Ready to Grow. Dr. Charlotte Long and Deb Bushway will be on the webinar. They've recently created 2 new resources to assist institutions seeking to build and scale high-quality CBE programs. So they will be sharing those 2 resources, the Storytelling Toolkit and the Quality Framework for CBE Programs User Guide. So participants will learn more about how to make the most use out of these new resources. So Kurt, I just want to say thank you once again for your time. We really appreciate your presentation, and I will make sure to give you those contacts so they can follow up with you in case they have any further questions.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you all. You guys have a great day.